guys, in this video we will look at functions in Python. We will be looking at what is a function, why do we need function, and how do we use functions in Python. You would have heard about mathematical functions, like you have an input x and then you put that into the function and the output will be y. Your function could be something that takes in an input and gives the square of that input. Example, if you give 2 and the output is 4, or if you give 3 and the output is 9, that is a function. It need not just be one input, it can be more than one input. Say if you want to have two numbers and then you're finding the sum of the two numbers, you can put that into a function, give two numbers, and you'll get the output as the sum of the two numbers. The same way we'll have functions in Python as well. Now, why do we need functions? Suppose I'm performing a bunch of operations multiple times in my code, and it won't be at the same time one after the other. If it's that, then I can use a for loop. It could be maybe at different times, like maybe first in the beginning of the code itself I'm performing the function, then maybe like 30 or 40 lines later I'm again performing the same function. So instead of writing the set of operations again and again, I can just put those set of operations into a function and then I can call the function whenever I want. So that is why I'm going to use functions. Functions make my code more readable. Even if you're a beginner and you're looking at someone's code, if they have allotted each of their operations into a function, it's easy for the person to understand. Even for you, if you're coding your code, or later on if you're debugging the code, it's much easier when you're using functions. Now, how are we going to do this in Python? Before that, we are going to be looking at the different types of functions. We've already learned about functions. It's not something that's new. We've looked at built-in functions. Remember, we saw len function, how you can calculate the length of a string, the length of a list, the length of a tuple using the len function, or how you can append elements into the list using the append function. And you have so many functions like this. And so these are all built-in functions. Python has already built it for us. The other type of function is also there in Python, but before I use it, I have to first import a module. For example, the sine function in maths, I can't just say sine of a number and I will not get the answer. Before that, I have to import math module using the import keyword, and then I can use the sine function. So you have many functions like that where you can import the module and you can use it. It's not very hard, it's really easy. So these are two functions that are already there in Python. Now, another type of function is the user-defined functions, which is you yourself are going to define functions and you will use it later on in your code. So how are we going to write these functions? So now this is the syntax for defining a function. So you will be using a define keyword, and then you will have the name of the function. It could be anything. Here I've used name underscore of underscore function. And then in between your brackets, you're just going to put the inputs that your function will take in and perform an operation on. So here I want input 1 and input 2. So I'm going to take these two inputs. Now this need not just be input 1 and input 2. Those are not keywords. You can have any variable. You can use x, you can use y. Anything is fine. Then colon, and then under this function you're going to have statement 1, statement 2 and statement 3. Whatever statements you want to add in your function, whatever functionality your function has to do, all that will be present in this place. So this will be called as the body of the function. And notice how the body is indented towards the right. This tells us that this is the function's body, meaning this belongs to the function. Now this is you're defining this particular function in the code. Now when you're coming across your code, you're realizing that, oh, I need to use this function somewhere. So how am I going to call this function? So for that, I will use the name of the function, and then in between the brackets, I will put my own inputs. So x and y. And later on, if I want to use another function again, I'll call the function again and put the inputs. Now let us look at an example for you to understand better. So the question says you're given two numbers and you have to find if it's odd or even. First, I'm defining the function here. It's define odd or even. I'm taking in two inputs, and then with the help of if and elif statements, I'm finding out if the input 1 is even, or if the input 1 is odd, if the input 2 is even, or if the input 2 is odd. And I just have to print these statements. Now this is defined in the function, but it's still not, we have not yet provided any specific input to these functions yet. So how do I do that? I'll call these functions. So at a particular time in the code, suppose I want to send 2 and 3, and I want to find out if 2 is a odd number, or if 2 is an even number, if 3 is an odd number, or if 3 is an even number. I will just use the function name, and then in between the brackets I will put my input. Same way for another time, if I want to send 4 and 6, I will do the same. Now I have something called as return keyword. Earlier, inside the function itself, you're getting all the printed statements. There's no value being returned. Return meaning no value is being sent back to the functional call. So what happens here is when you send 2 and 3, automatically it goes here, puts 2 is input 1 and 3 becomes input 2. And then whatever statement is correct, it will print that. Same goes for 4, 6. You can't see any value being returned. But you can do that in Python, where after you're performing your operation, you can return the value back to this functional call. So that is what we are seeing here. This function is taking two numbers. So it's taking num1 and num2, and it's returning num1 plus num2. Now again, this need not be numbers. If the user passes a string, say apple and fruit, it will just concatenate the string and give it to you. In this line, you can see the function is being called and we are passing two numbers 5 and 3. But you can also see what was different from before. We have something called sum1 equal to sum of num 5, 3. So what happens? 5, 3 goes, 5 is num1, 3 is num2, and then it will return num1 plus num2, which is 8. So now returned value will go and get stored in this sum1. So now if I print sum1, it will be 8. Same way, the returned value for this function call will be stored in sum2, and the sum2 will be 9. So here, num1 and num2, which I'm defining in the function, those are called parameters. And when I'm using the function call, the numbers that I'm giving here, or the string, or whatever you give, that will be called as the arguments. Till now, we knew how many arguments were going to be passed in the functional call. Like if we had two parameters in the function definition, we will have two arguments being passed through the functional call. So it was always the same number. But sometimes the user, when they're using the function, they can send any number of arguments. You won't know how many arguments they are sending. So your function definition should be ready to accept any number of arguments the user is sending during the function call. First, let us look at the last two lines. Both these lines, you can see that a function call is happening and whatever value is being returned is returned to the variable p1, and the next line it's returned to the variable p2. Now that is not important. What is important is that how many arguments are being passed here. Here you have 5, 3, 4, 6, 7. 5 numbers being passed. Whereas in the second function call, you have 3 numbers being passed. For this, if you say input 1, input 2, input 3, input 4, input 5, that means here you have to change it to input 1, input 2, input 3. So that you cannot do with one function itself. In order to solve this problem, in the function definition, you just have to put star with your variable name. So what happens? This numbers variable will actually become a tuple. So whatever values you pass here, it could be any number of values. And each function call, it can be different number of arguments that you're passing. It will get stored into this tuple. And then whatever operations you have to perform, you can perform here and return your answer. In this case, we are taking the product of all these numbers. So we will iterate through the tuple and then we will find the product and we'll return the product to P1 and P2. If you don't want to pass your arguments in the same order, like earlier in the first example that we saw, we had two numbers and then we had to check if these two numbers were even or odd. So whatever number you send first in the argument will go and it'll be the first number in the parameter, right? Like when I sent 5 and 3, 5 was input 1 and 3 was input 2. Instead of sending it as 5 and 3, if I send it as 3 and 5, then 3 will be input 1 and 5 will be input 2. What if in my Python function call, I don't want to send it in this particular proper order. I want to send it in any order, but the function definition should correctly know which number is what. So how do I do that? For that I'll use keyword arguments. Now look at the first function call. So here I'm doing function 5, 3. So 5 will be the first and 3 will be second. Now if I'm printing, I'll print I am first and I'll print 5. I am second, 3. Now in the second case, you can see 3 is actually written first and then only 5 is being written. But we are using keywords to store these values. Like 3 is stored in the keyword second and 5 is stored in the keyword first. And the same keyword is what is your parameters. So automatically when it sees second equal to 3, it will go here. And when it sees first equal to 5, it will go to first in the function definition. And then when it's printing, it will print the same way how it printed for the earlier function call. I am first will be 5 and I am second is 3. So in this you can see the order is different, but because I'm using a keyword and I'm using an argument, I will be able to achieve the same result without having to send the arguments in a particular order. Now, if I don't know how many keyword arguments are going to be passed in the function, what should I do? Now, earlier we saw how many arguments are passed in the function. If I didn't know how many arguments are passed in the function, I'll know that, okay, I have to use star and the variable name. It will be stored as a tuple. But in this case, you have to use the same idea, the same format. Look at the function call. It says my function f name equal to John, L name equal to Smith. So you're sending a keyword and a value, keyword and a value. And here we don't know how many arguments are going to be passed. So we are going to use star kid. So kid will be a variable, and instead of using 1 star, we will be using 2 star. 1 star is only for normal arguments. For keyword arguments, we will be using 2 stars. So what happens here? This kid will actually be a dictionary. So now kid of L name will be L name. So now it will be printing his last name is plus kid of L name. So kid of L name, if you look at this itself, you can see it is a dictionary format. In the dictionary kid, you want to find out what is the value stored in the key L name. And now you know it is Smith. Okay, so remember the last example when we saw for just normal arguments, it was stored in a tuple. But in this example, for keyword arguments, it will be stored in a dictionary. Why is it stored in a dictionary? Because you're sending a key and a value. So now let us solve a few questions in Python. First, I will define a function. So in order to define a function, I'll use the def keyword. Name of the function, it can be function. And I'll give variable names x and y. And I want to print x and the next I have to print y. Now, how do I call? When I'm calling, I'm not going to call inside the function. If I want to call, I'll say function 2, 3. So now if I save it, here you can see 2 and 3 are getting printed. Now if I try 2 functional calls, so now I'm going to add function 4, 5. So now I'm getting 2, 3, 4, 5. Now this function call can be anywhere. Like I said, it can be, you can have print function and then you can have one functional call here. After that, again you can say second function. And now you can see it's writing functions 2, 3, second function call 4, 5. So the thing is you can call this function anywhere in the program. Now I'm going to pass any number of arguments from the function call. So it can be any number of arguments. In this case, I'm going to pass 2, 3, 4, 5. And here I'm only going to pass 4 and 5. So what should I do for that? Here I have to say star x so that all of these arguments will be stored in a tuple when in the function definition. Then I can say for I in x, then print I. Now if I run this, you can see 2, 3, 4, 5. Now how to use keyword arguments. So f and s, okay. And if I pass 3 and 2 in the second functional call, what would be the answer? So I'll get f is 2, s is 3, and the second functional call I'll get f is 3 and s is 2. But I want to get the same answer as this in the second functional call without changing the order in which I'm sending the arguments. So all I have to do is over here I have to say s equal to 3 and f equal to 2. So I have not changed the order, I've only put s equal to 3 and f equal to 2. Now when I run it, I will get the same output as the first functional call. We will be looking at what are default arguments. So here in this function you can see I have written the function definition, and inside this the parameters I have assigned to a value. So in this case it has to print I am from a particular country, and I've already given the parameter with a value as Norway. So what happens in this functional call, what you will get is I am from India, and this functional call you'll get I am from Japan. But when you come to this functional call, there is no value that is being passed. So what happens in Python when there is no value being passed, it will check if you're having a default argument. So in this case I have a default argument Norway. So because there is nothing here, it will just print I am from Norway. So let us check this. Now here you can see the output I am from India, I am from Japan. Both these cases India and Japan were passed in the function, but here there was nothing passed to the function, so it just took the default argument. That's all for today. Thanks for watching. Please like, share and subscribe.